Hello, so I'm Mr. Price, a teacher from the MFL department, and I'm going to be talking to you about a revision structure, a revision plan, which you can run over a year, beginning with building confidence right through to being ready for the actual exam. So my sections will include creating a home plan, thinking about motivation and self-discipline, independent revision, monitoring your progress along the way, some suggested resources, because there will obviously be lots offered to you and lots to choose from, keeping a balance between the four skills of reading, writing, speaking, listening, and using your revision guide. This is made by teachers from the school, either the blue revision guide, which has all of this detail in, or the yellow one for German. So blue for French, yellow for German. So without further ado, the first thing that I would suggest doing is creating a home plan and looking at when you can do this revision. Now, my suggestion would be 3 times 30-minute slots at some point during the week. I would certainly go for the little and often approach. And with regards to motivation, if I were a student at this stage of my school career on a GCSE, language and other subjects for that matter, I would most certainly include other people in the family on this. So in a way, this is to dispel myths and a common conversation that we would have at parents' evening about how a parent could help if they've not studied the foreign language before. Well, I really think that parents have a crucial role to play in this, and that is in the role of motivator. So, for example, once a conversation has been had at home about the 3 times 30-minute recommended revision slots, parents can really help with checking how things are going and giving reminders as students get into this routine, and then talking to them about how it's going along the way. And that's a really crucial role. Okay, so to begin with, we would look at building confidence. So for up until Christmas, I would suggest that these 3 times 30-minute slots are used for building confidence, and I'll go into more detail about how this can be done. Now, with regards to monitoring progression, if this confidence building technique that I'm going to go through in more detail is matched to the alphabet, if we use an alphabet as a memory hook for what I'm about to explain, you can each time go back before you begin a new session to check how you're progressing and check what's actually in your memory. And then just a final reminder before I move on to the next slide, that all of the detail I'm about to give, obviously you could come back to this clip, but it is in both the revision guide. So I'm essentially going through the guide step by step. So, independent revision. And how you would begin to build up confidence. Now, my suggestion is for this technique that you use the alphabet as a memory hook. So your first job would be to look at how many verbs you know. So you would quite simply write down the alphabet, as you can see on the screen, and you would think of verbs, French example here, you would think of which verbs you already know after each letter, and then start to build them up from your books by asking teachers if you need more. What you're aiming for is to write down the alphabet, write verbs after each letter, and you're aiming for GCSE standard for 30 or so. So 30 plus verbs would be ideal. And in your practice sessions, you would simply go back to the alphabet, writing down the letters as you can see on the screen here, and practice reproducing verbs without looking along the way. Okay, so with that established, as we can see hopefully on slide 3, is what would we add to that? So when you're at a stage where you know 30 plus verbs from memory after the alphabet, your next stage would be to make these verbs into actual sentences. So you'd be adding that extra detail. Here it can be seen as the green on this slide. The extra detail that would be added to make them into sentences. So what you're actually doing is growing your alphabet. So each of your 30-minute sessions, you've moved on. You can now do 30 verbs. You're now going to progress that to 30 sentences. And the only other thing to mention about this is, please be careful to double check the details that you're adding. So I would suggest checking things with your teachers in school, or of course, taking sentences that are already formed and have already been marked from your exercise books until you're up to 30 to match these verbs from memory. Okay, so where next with this? Well, we're going to stick with the alphabet as a memory hook. So each time we go back again, we go for 30 verbs. And then as you can see with the green there on the screen, that's how we move them into sentences. Now, from that, the next stage will be to add opinions to them. So what you can see on the French one here, and you could replicate that for German quite easily, is to put the word because after each one, so that we're giving an opinion or a reason after each sentence. So what we're doing is doubling the length of it with very little extra effort. If you're not sure on how to do this, it is all explained in the guide. So just to go backwards, we begin with the alphabet as a memory hook for 30 verbs, which we then move into 30 sentences, which we then move into 30 sentences with opinions. Moving on to the next slide, and something not to be forgotten to take full advantage of this revision repetition that's now getting into full flow, is when you can do your 30 verbs, which you move then into 30 sentences, and you add your opinion onto it, don't be happy with that and don't stop there. There's an easy trick that will work really well within the GCSE mark scheme to add a further detail on before we stop this process. And that is to add on a further connective. The example you can see here on the French slide, the French example, is to use the word even if, or in fact, even if I prefer. So what you're doing is just offering an alternative to your opinion for an extra extension, which is really straightforward to do, but will get you valuable extra points within the GCSE mark scheme. So to go backwards again, 30 verbs, moving into 30 sentences, adding opinions, and then adding a final connective. On to slide 6, so just a bit of a checklist here. So we'd now, in this revision plan, be moving towards Christmas. I would say that would be an appropriate amount of time to be building up this knowledge base with the alphabet as a memory hook. So with, by now, what would be a sound knowledge of the verbs, the extra details to make your sentence, opinion phrases, and then that extra connective just to get those extra points. A final touch, if you can still fit it in and you're now hopefully feeling really confident, in December or before December, would be to look back to the revision guide for a couple of high scoring phrases, which we would just add in on the end of these sentences, intermittently. There are lots of examples in there. These would be more complex sentences, so maybe a couple will be fine and just using them every now and again, but it will just be really sort of the icing on the cake for the knowledge base that you've now got. So there's more detail about them, language specific, in the guide.